Welcome to Into 661 Youth Voices for Kern, where we discuss issues that are of importance to our community, but specifically issues that are important to the youth in our community. Dr. Oliver Rosales, Professor of History at Bakersfield College. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So I want to talk about a project that you're working on. It's called Digital Delano. Tell me more about it and how it came about.
Digital Delano, Preserving an International Community's History, is part of a grant funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities to expand the capacity of rural communities, immigrant communities, to know their past. And one of the challenges was that with that, in those kinds of communities, is they don't have access to traditional archives like a city would. And so the project for the past year has been harvesting local histories, primarily through students, but through families, church groups, outreach efforts to build an archive, a community archive of stories, of documents, and again, oral history narratives that can tell the story of a community. And we're having a culminating event Tuesday, May 1st, where we're going to showcase some of our archive. That is in partnership with the Bakersfield College Archive as well as CSU Bakersfield.
Tell me about some of the stories, or a story if you can. One that sticks out, there's probably 1,000, right? But one story in your mind that sticks out that probably hasn't been told or seen in the public so far.
There's so many, but I've been talking about the project recently because of our event, but we've gotten some great letters of correspondence between Delano families and Japanese American families who were interned during World War II that particularly talk about the congenial relations when Japanese folks were being interned and losing their properties and businesses, and the way that Delano residents kind of stepped up to mitigate some of that pain. There's also been a lot of great histories dealing with, of course, the United Farm Workers, but telling that story of the grape strike and boycott from a grassroots perspective as opposed to a leadership perspective about how ordinary residents experienced that very, very tumultuous period in the 1960s and 70s.
And one of the things you and I were talking about just a few minutes before we started rolling cameras here, so to speak, was the idea of Filipinos. There's a huge Filipino population in Delano, and I don't think a lot, when the national story is kind of told, everyone knows Cesar Chavez, right, Dolores Huerta, and the UFW movement, but they don't know and hear about when you talk about grassroots, a lot of Filipino were farm workers and were part of that movement as well.
What's amazing that most residents in Kern County don't know is that Delano looms so large for Filipino Americans in the United States. It is a place of pilgrimage. It's connected to a larger trans-Pacific migration network, and through this oral history project, we've been able to flesh out those details and to look at the family networks from the Philippines to Stockton, to Yuba, and also to Delano. And so I think one of the results of this project that we're trying to educate the public is that Delano, in a lot of ways, is the center of Filipino-American history in so many ways, particularly in California. And I think the project has helped reorient people toward Delano's very, very rich history. It's a place of gravity.
Well, I mean, we have Delano Philippine Weekend, right, every single July, but how did Delano come to be kind of the hub here for Filipinos? Why did they come to Delano of all places? How did they end up here?
It's part of a migrant network. I mean, certainly the labor demand in the South San Joaquin Valley for farm labor was dominant, but it's part of, again, a larger network of Filipino migration from the Pacific Northwest down into the agricultural fields of California. And so the Delano Filipino-American community really became rooted after World War II as opposed to being migratory. And so some of the stories that we're getting from students, again, talk about those either deep connections to Delano's kind of post-World War II community, or again, transnational stories, narratives about the Philippines and about why folks were leaving in the 70s and the 80s. And so again, there's too many great stories to tell, but the archive is capturing that so students, researchers, kids who are doing History Day projects can have a place that they can go to learn about their local history.
And why is it important? I mean, it sounds like you're kind of touching on it, but why is it important for students of color to kind of know?
It's so
that?
important. I'm a student of color. Yeah.
Or non-students of color.
I wrote a dissertation on Bakersfield's civil rights history between World War II and 1980, and I had to go to Sacramento, I had to go to Washington, D.C., I had to go to Stanford, I had to go to Detroit, Michigan to learn about Bakersfield's past. And while those archives are really, really important, as a professional historian, I've done a lot of work to try to build an archive from the ground up in partnership with, again, different organizations who have access to those materials that are not preserved. So the idea of cultural and heritage preservation is definitely part of my work agenda. And again, kids need to know their stories. They need to know where they come from, because the kinds of inequalities that we face in particular in the Central Valley have a past. They did not happen overnight. It's rooted in a longer history of kind of systemic marginalization. And learning how our ancestors dealt with that, right, in the 20th century is really, really important.
How would you say that kind of informs what we're seeing today, where we're seeing a major shift not only on the high school board, but also when in terms of actual government, governance of the county, so to speak?
You know, like I said,
Supervisors.
there's been a lot of systemic challenges in Bakersfield, in Kearns, since really the urbanization period after the Great Dust Bowl migrations. But there has also been solutions, and communities of color, African Americans, Mexican Americans, civic groups proposed solutions and did incremental changes that had real benefits. And I think for social justice activists, civil rights folks on the ground today, they can learn a lot about the strategies that folks used in the past to advance progress. And I think, again, that's where the utility of a usable past comes into play.
And the big question is, when this is all kind of archived, where will it be available? Will it only be available on the BC campus, or are you going to be putting it on some website where everyone can kind of
Yeah, this is definitely, the grant is mostly trying to harvest the materials so they're not lost, to literally just get them digitized. But the Bakersfield College Archives, CSUB Special Collections, UC Merced, these are our major partners in trying to create a permanent digital home for these things. But the grant itself really is going out into the communities and getting it digitized before it's lost forever. The next part of the project is making sure it has real public access.
Okay, well, interesting. We'll continue to look for it and see how it kind of continues to develop as you're getting past the collection stage and then eventually making it accessible to everybody. Dr. Rosales, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, and thank you so much for joining us on In the 661, Youth Voices for Kearns.